So good day to all, this is Dr. Jawahar Surisetti, and we are going to have a conversation with TV Mohandas, who is the chairman of Aarin Capital, and Nisha Holla, who is the technology fellow of CCAMP. It's a very proud privilege for us to able to speak to people who are actually connected to the ground. And UN 75 actually yearns to bring out people from the ground, the researches that have been done, the studies that have been done. And also we'll have two reference points. One is UN 50 years of UN and 100 years of UN. So as we stand today, we might go back 25 years and go forward 25 years and talk about both this in all aspects. So if it is education, then education 25 years before and 25 years later, the shape of it and where we have moved. So I'll start with Nisha. Nisha, 3 points that you can remember where we have moved forward from 25 years before till today.
Oh, wonderful. So 25 years ago, India had just gone through the economic liberalization in 1991. We had opened up our economy and we had started interacting with the world. And so we saw a lot of changes coming into India through the globalization approach and through connecting with other markets in the world, right? So one big change that had happened is until 1991, women's literacy rates, for example, had not been given a lot of attention. So women's literacy was only about 9% around the time of independence, and it had very slowly risen 4 decades after that to 43% in 1989. But after economic liberalization, I think we've seen a very big rise in women's literacy. We've seen the contact with the outer world and all the globalization have an impact on India's women. And we've seen India's women rise tremendously beyond that point. So I think around 1990 to 1995, which was the period that you're referring to, we've seen Indian women's literacy go up from 43% to 70%. We've seen increased women's participation in the economy, in the education systems. Last year we reached a wonderful milestone in our higher education system where for the first time in India's history, the gross enrollment ratio of women in higher education exceeded that of men. So we're seeing an exponential increase in the way women are participating in the economy and in the education systems. And I think that turning point was that decade of the 90s, which you're referring to. So that is one monumental change. The other one, of course, is again tied to economic liberalization, and MDP will be able to tell us that journey better, but it allowed for India to build big companies like Infosys, for example, which were able to find global markets, design in India, design world-class systems in India, and then build for the globe. And that IT industry trajectory is now creating an impetus for India's startup industry. And so again, we find the roots of that growth trajectory and tangent starting from that decade of the 90s. And then of course, the biggest one, India's economic growth has been phenomenal since that decade that you referred to. In again, economic liberalization around the 1990s, we were hardly $275 billion in GDP. Today, we're close to 3 trillion, pre-COVID, of course. And we've seen a rise of 8.5% year on year in dollar terms every year. And apart from China, India is the only major economy that has been able to achieve this. And this is setting the trend for India's growth for the next 25 years, all of these 3 trend lines. And I think this is some of the most exciting things that happened in that decade around 1995.
Okay. Mohan, the same question to you.
Well, let me take a global view. 1995, population growth was still a large issue. Population was growing. China had one-child policy in 1978, but population was still growing. Europe, I think, was still growing. Africa was growing. India was growing. The United States are growing. And everybody was worried what will happen to population in the next 100 years. Then education standards were very good in the US and in Europe, very poor in India, very poor in China. China was still developing. China had not created infrastructure, and poor in Africa too. Then as far as employment was concerned, India still had, at that point of time, more than about, I think, 65% people in agriculture. China was still an agrarian economy because with labor intensive manufacturing just coming in 95, because primarily it was shifting from an agrarian economy to a labor intensive industry. There was I think the USSR was still around 25 years ago, if I'm right. Maybe I think it's gone, right? I think USSR fell by then.
They're just broken up.
They're just broken up. And Western Europe was still growing, and they had good employment. I mean, they have not changed much. The United States had large employment. I think, you know, they were still going, and I think they were ready to face, they were come out of the stagflation of, in which, you know, we had Paul Volcker raise the interest rates. South America was, you know, going sideways. Africa was still down. Now, if you look at the world today, the biggest change is in demographics. And demographics are going to have an impact on education and on growth and employment. For example, if you look at Asia, Japan's economy, Japan's population has been declining for the last 5 years. Last year, they declined by about 500,000 people, and they got a population of 124 million, which may decline to 97 million by 2050 and 67 million. China's working age population peaked last 3 years ago at around 650 million, if I'm right. And China is growing very slowly. They produce only 16 million babies. India's fertility rate has come down to 2.0 right now. And the whole of South India is below replacement at 1.7. West Bengal and Punjab too are around 1.6, 1.7. Even the northern populous states are seeing a decline. And this decline has been across all social groups. And if you look at Pakistan, the growth is still there. Bangladesh has come down to near replacement rate. And Russia and Central Asia population is stagnant or declining. Scandinavia is declining. In Europe, is aging. I think the average age right now is about 47 years. And if you look at UK too, you know, population is aging. And if at all there's growth, it's because of immigration. Africa, of course, is growing. Nigeria is growing pretty rapidly. And if you look at the United States, it's just growing by 1%. And fertility, I think, is come down to 1.3 or 1.4. And if they don't get immigrants, you know, they may age very, very rapidly. South America is, of course, is peaked in population growth. So I think the UN projections for 2100 of around, I think, 10.5, 11 billion may not be met. Latest data I hear is about 9.6 billion. So in the next 75 years, next 25 years, the big challenge the world has to face is a reduced workforce in many, many countries, is an increasing number of people above the age of 60. Japan right now has more than 25%, increased longevity, greater automation, etc. And if you look at education, the United States, of course, has got a gross enrollment rate of 75, 80%. Europe is the same. Africa is still poor. South America is coming up, I think, mid-30s, if I'm right. And if you look at India, India is around 26.5, is going up at 3.6% a year. China is got about, the gross enrollment rate is close to 50%, because I think they got a lot of the people, they invested heavily in education. So education infrastructure all around the world is much, much better. And today technology is helping reshape education. Now, if you look at jobs, Japan is automating, they have a labor shortage, they're opening up to immigration for lower level jobs, but they're still hesitant because they're a very homogeneous society. China, of course, is seeing a working age population decline, but there's greater automation happening, reduced number of people in agriculture. India is seeing 25 million young kids come into, attain the age of 21 every year. They were born 20 years ago, and will be stagnant for the next 2 or 3 years and then decline. And we are producing, we need possibly 15 million jobs a year. We're producing about 10 to 11 million jobs a year, which is not very bad. And women participate in the workforce has come down, primarily because women are getting better educated. They are much better off economically, so they're not working in the farms or going out for labor. And I think the growth in women's education is more in North India than South India. South India has got surplus jobs. Nisha will talk about it. North India has got more graduates coming, lesser jobs. And if you look at Africa, I think increasing education accomplishment means they're also emigrating to the Middle East. They're going all over the place. And we're seeing very interesting increase in education and job opportunities in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa has grown at 6.5%, I think, in the last decade before COVID, because of the boom in commodities led by China. Europe has got unemployment of around 8 to 10%. It went up to COVID, but they're aging. And, many immigrants are clamoring to come inside. And the UK has stopped immigration from Europe right now, and the jobs are there. Of course, COVID has hit them. You've got to see the new normal. And the United States saw huge job increases, some of the best years in the Trump presidency till COVID hit them. And now the jobs have started coming back. And South America, I think, is still going through rapid change. And I think, situation is not very good, according to my data. And if you look at the biggest impact on jobs in future is going to be automation and technology. Because a lot of the job, maybe 65% of all the jobs done by people can be automated, can be done by robots. So all across, the good jobs are getting automated. So the job scene, we're seeing a lot of highly paid jobs, lesser in number. The middle bracket of jobs are getting automated. Lower jobs like retail, like salespeople, etc., restaurants, cafes still remain. And that will remain because it is it's difficult to automate and the costs are very high compared to the wages that you pay. And this is the fact in the developed countries. So even India is going to feel the impact. China is going to feel the impact. And Africa has to grow up faster now, recover more to create the kind of jobs. So I think if you look at everything over the last 25 years and the next 25 years, we're going to see a very, very different world 25 years from now. A world which is aging much better, working age population shrinking in most countries in the world, a larger part of the world. China, India will be 40% of the world's population. Yes, if you add Europe and Japan, Southeast Asia, and you add the United States, that could be maybe 60% of the world. And, a lot of automation happening. So good jobs will disappear. We don't know what is going to happen. Education accomplishment will rise. More and more people will go for a degree. Maybe they'll get better educated. Cost of education may come down because of technology. So we are at an inflection point, and I'm very optimistic about the future of the world.
Okay. Nisha, from a point which Mohan had raised, the birth rate is what he had mentioned. Now, let's say everywhere it is decreasing, then is it going to affect the gender thing also? Because in Punjab and Haryana, we have seen a skewed ratio.
Yeah. So I think the gender ratio is normalizing now. So the data from, if you look at the civil registration system in India, for example, they record the births and deaths every year per state and per gender and everything. So the gender ratios are normalizing and fertility is decreasing. So I would think that slowly we would start normalizing on the gender as well. But the trend will continue where, in states where there are a lot more men than women, then we would expect that decline to be smaller and smaller as the years go by. But, just to put some data on the table, now India's fertility rates overall were about 3.4 back in 1991, and it's decreased very sharply. It's come down to about 2. For emerging economies, they say the replacement rate is at about 2.3. And so India is already under replacement for as an emerging economy. And there's a very wide skew between the fertility rates of different states, as MDP mentioned. And even within that, there is the skew between the female and male babies is coming down. So I would think that would normalize pretty soon. Yeah.
But looking at the past and the skewed ratio, what would have been the issues which was causing this skew?
We've seen this skew before where, so generally India was a poor country and a lot of emphasis was placed on the male baby at some point. And, I think people prefer having male babies over female babies, and that's how that skew started. But today we're seeing that trend sort of reverse. We're seeing women women support their parents. We're seeing the girl child go to school. For now, in fact, the gross enrollment ratios of girl children in schools is higher than that of boys. And so we're starting to see a lot of that normalize. We're seeing those factors go away. We're also seeing higher acceptance of the girl child in families where traditionally maybe it was not so. And so that's why I would think that now those factors are starting to go away a little bit.
If you look at the data, Prime Minister's program of Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao has really paid off. The gender ratio has improved in favor of the females in the last 3 years. I think the data is there in the civil registration data, and especially in the states where the gender ratio is very skewed. I think India today has about 928 per thousand or so. It has come down a little bit. Again, it's gone up. And I think this issue is more in North India. And if you look at education, you find that more and more people are getting educated. And when women have more education, they have lesser babies. And when they have lesser babies, they don't care whether it is a male or a girl. They just want the baby, right? Because they're not going to have too many babies. So they're very clear about it. But one-child families is increasing very highly. And I saw a piece of data which said that 35 women out of 1,000 don't marry at all. So I think there is a need for more analysis of the data, because today, to me, demographic change all across the world is the biggest disruptor to whatever has happened in the past 25 years. And I think all of us need to study that. Each country needs to study and put in place things to make sure that it is done in a very proper manner. For example, Japan does have deep problems, and they don't know how to solve it. They're trying to incentivize people to have more babies, but they don't. They have got a lower woman participation in the workforce. Now, Prime Minister Suga has said he wants more women in the workforce. So I think the focus is also to get more and more women in the workforce. If more women come in the workforce, they're not going to have too many babies because they want to build their careers. Women are getting educated and they're going to do things. So all the doomsday prediction about unbridled growth in population, everything else is not true. It's not true anywhere around the world. I think this is the biggest issue which will positively impact employment, growth, and income.
Okay, so you had said that we are at inflection point right now in terms of technology now and economy. So in case we are not able, in a certain sense, to predict what is going to happen in the near future or far future, how do we design our education system?
Well, I think in the education system, there are 4 things that we have to do. First, give access to everybody for higher education. Bring in social equity so that everybody gets educated. Basic degree. A basic degree has become the equivalent of class 12, maybe 20 years ago. So people will spend their formative years of 18, 23 in college. All right. And then put in skill development to make sure they get a kind of skills. Maybe 25, 30% will do further education, and maybe 5, 10% will go on to do a PhD. So the education system will hold more young people than it did much earlier. And then we got to give them the digital skills. We got to give them particular skills that are going to be there. And I think we're going to see the rise of the gig economy and the rise of the need for individual performance as against study, monthly wages jobs. Because today with technology, the gig economy can employ a lot of people that will give them flexibility. But then a time is coming when the world has to think of a basic income too. Because, you know, the divide between the rich and the poor is expanding. And the divide between the rich and the poor is expanding because of 2 reasons. One, people who are rich have got accumulated capital, and capital is getting greater returns than labor. If you look at Piketty's writing, he makes it very clear. Over the last 50 years, possibly, capital has got outsized rewards as against labor, which was the reverse of the first 1 or 2 decades after the Second World War. So that means if you've got capital, you're going to become richer and richer. And if you've got capital in technology companies, you become even richer. And second, the advent of technology means that those people who are in technology, who are in this growing area, get much higher salaries, much higher income, outsized rewards because of stock options, etc. And that is not a good thing for the world, because we have to make sure when population is not growing so fast, people are aging, everybody gets something to sustain themselves, lest they rock the boat. You've seen what is happening in the United States, where in the Obama presidency, middle class income never went up, didn't go up for 15 years. And it's only in the Trump presidency that middle class income went up because of growth, especially for the Hispanics and the blacks. I hope people talk more about it. And now, of course, there's again a problem. And now the disgruntlement in the lower category of people in terms of income is coming out on the streets. Now, if you don't want this disgruntlement coming out, you've got to give them. And Prime Minister Modi has come out with this fantastic strategy of making sure that 60% of the population get houses, access to toilets, water in the tap, power in the switch, a roof over the head, education for the children, and a mobile phone, DBT in the bank account, job opportunities, work money for work, etc., just to make sure that basic sustenance is taken care of. So I think the focus has to be on basic sustenance for everybody, better health opportunities for everybody, better education opportunities for everybody, more skill development. And there'll be a lot of jobs that cannot be automated, and there'll be a lot of jobs that will come in the service area. So I think it's extremely important that, we look at things anew, and each country designs its own policy. You can't have a global policy, everybody, because things have changed. What policy can you have for India and Japan? What policy can you have for the United States and Japan? What policy can you have for the United States and China, right? China has had a one-child policy from 1978. So 2 generations of one-child, families have come up, right? And we don't know what's going to happen, right? And there's a lot of accumulated wealth that is passing on in China. It's a very, very large economy. So I think we have to look at every part of the world very differently and work out unique strategies.
Yeah. And even within countries, I think each country cannot have one solution for the entire country, especially for countries as big as India. Now, you look at India, look at the higher education system. The southern states all have gross enrollment ratios of 30 and higher, which means 30% of their young population between the ages of 18 and 23 are in college, they're getting degrees. And that's why the jobs are in the south. These graduates are filling those jobs. But also in the north, the gross enrollment ratios are pretty low. You look at Bihar, it's 13.6. You look at Jharkhand, it's 20. You look at Rajasthan, it's 23. And so there's a very big difference in within the country and even within states. Some districts are more prosperous, other districts are not. And so that's why technology is going to be this big differentiator that can help bridge these gaps. We're already seeing technology has been the impetus for unprecedented financial and digital inclusion in India, for example. And we can also see the same thing is going to affect education going forward, because no longer does a state like Bihar have to depend on physical infrastructure to develop its education platforms. It can build large-scale digital platforms, large-scale education platforms in vernacular languages. Students can take training in whatever language they want. They can take it in a personalized way. They can take it in at their own pace, and they can pick courses that they want to do. And so technology is going to be this big difference in the way we skill people, the way we educate people. And that's why every district, every state, every country needs to look at it from its citizens' perspective, see what the citizens need, and build platforms for the citizens' needs.
Like both of you had mentioned, that a different policy making needs to happen at the micro level. I have an interesting incident that had happened. So I went with the education minister to a Mufassil area of very, it's a far away, far-flung tribal area. And the minister introduced me, and that program was known as Kya Banoge Munna Munni. So we wanted to understand that and empower these students that what do they want to do and what do they want resources in terms of resources. So everybody got up and said, I want to become doctor, I want to become teacher, engineer, collector, this, that. One student got up and put his hand on his hip, stood in a slanting way and said, I want to become a Naxalite. And everybody laughed. There were 2,500 students. The DEO, collector, everybody was there because the minister was there. So they were flabbergasted. Well, how did he respond to this? So they went and started scolding him. He started crying. He was in the 11th standard. Then I said, it is between me and him. I asked a question. He gave me an answer. Let me find out what is it. So when we found out what it was, he said, see, we have a computer center in our school. And this was way back. So he went to the computer center in 11th and said, I want to learn computers. The computer center run by a private organization in a government school for the government had a policy at that time in that particular state that till 10th, boys are allowed free computer education and till 12th, girls are allowed free computer education. So when he was in 11th and he went, he said, the government does not allow you to be taught here because you're in 11th. So you have to pay 10,000, we'll teach you. So he went home, thought about it, that my father's annual income is 10,000. If I pay, what will we eat? So I should find out a career where equipment is free, training is free. And he came to the conclusion that Naxalism is something where equipment and see, his thought process was perfectly right, bang on. But somewhere when we are making policies and we make very generic policies even across India, it might not apply to those kind of Mufassil areas. So policy making is the key to understand the local needs, desires, wants, aspirations, and then do it. So India being such a big country, Chhattisgarh might not be the same as Kerala or Tamil Nadu for that matter. So I completely agree that the policy making stands at the helm of affairs, and it can change, because I've seen Prime Minister Modi now as Chief Minister of Gujarat making some fantastic changes at the state level, and it gave very good results.
Prime Minister Modi has a aspirational district program. 105 districts have been picked up, where all the government schemes are getting concentrated for agriculture, for education, for health, etc. And they're showing very good results, because these are among the 200 poorest districts. Now, if all the government schemes are brought together, executed in the districts where there is money is there, but it's not being spent. And if you incentivize them and do it very well, you'll see a dramatic improvement. That's the way to tackle, and that has to be very localized. It cannot be one for everybody. It has to be very localized at the district level. And a district normally has something like about 2 million people. 2 million people, and the bigger districts, and 2 million people means it's like a small country, right, of Europe.
Yes. So Mohan, you had said that it's an aging Europe, but it's a young India. So is it right to think that we have a 20-30 year window in which the majority of youth will become majority of aged?
No, we will still be the youngest population in 2050 as per projections. And I think the rate is not going to climb up, even though, population is stabilizing, population will not grow too much. It may actually surprise us if the population, start declining by 2040 or so. We don't know, because we got to see how economic development impacts the poorer districts, and is happening in a remarkable manner. So we'll still be a young population, but my personal view is there is a lost generation in India which has to just go through life. And this is a lost generation which attain the age of majority, possibly in maybe 2005 till about maybe 2020, 2025, because during this time, the job creation has not been too high. The UPA years, 2004 to 2014, didn't see very high job creation.
Yes.
Now the NDA years has seen some increase in job creation, but not to the same extent. Now the people who graduated, people who attained the age of majority in the UPA years, and in the first 6 years of the NDA where they saw more jobs, and the next 4 years, may actually not see that kind of profile, because they'll be replaced by younger people. So once you're past the age of 30, you don't have many skills. What jobs are you going to get? Now, more and more jobs require skills, right? So today, I think it's very, for example, we produce 800,000 engineers, 200,000 get decent jobs, and the 200,000 may get employed. What happens to the balance 400,000? You don't get jobs at all, are very low paying jobs, right? And what happens to women who are educated? Like Nisha said, 26.8 or something % of women are getting a degree. But in the north of India, there are no jobs for women. They will not migrate to the south. They'll stay at home, correct? So I think that whole generation, till the economy grows up to maybe $5 trillion by 2026, $10 trillion by 2031, this is a lost generation. They have to go through life with low paying jobs. Hopefully the people who come into the job market 2 or 3 years from now will have a better future.
Okay. But you wanted to say
now, just to put some data on the table, see, this is why India's focus on human capital development is so important. According to the 1991 census, the children between the ages of 0 to 6 years as a percentage of the population was 18% in India. By 2011, that had already come down to 13%. And data shows by 2021, there'll be only 11% of the population. So our growth of children and our production of children is coming down. And so soon we're going to have a large aging population with a gradually shrinking workforce. Now, this is where India has an advantage over, say, Europe or Japan, because there the decline came kind of faster. India's workforce will start declining slower and slower. But we have to start reacting now, because we have all these numbers of young people, the lost generation, as MDP mentioned, who are going through the economy now. So India's demographic dividend is going through the economy now, but they're not getting these high-skilled jobs. They're not getting high-paying jobs. And they have not had access to, if not good higher education, unfortunately, India has not set up good vocational training programs for this generation to go get skills and then be placed in an automobile factory or a phone factory and so on. That is how Germany does it. That is how Japan and South Korea do it, where the vocational training of the jobs is so carefully tailored to what the industry needs that the minute they finish their program, they've gotten a job in a plant. And it's a high skilled job, it's a high paying job. And so these are the kind of factors that India needs to start looking at, where human capital development is concerned, because otherwise we will have this large aging population supported by a gradually shrinking workforce, and then we will be in trouble if we have not focused on our human capital development.